Hi, welcome back to Thoughts from a Dizzy Dude. I'm your Dizzy Dude, Adam Tilted, coming to you live from Houston, Texas, USA. Today is Wednesday, October 10th, 2018. Good morning. There is a giant hurricane that is about to tear through Florida. And we've been seeing more and more of these huge hurricanes. So I thought I would talk about today, do you ever wonder why hurricanes spin? Why do they spin like that? And why do they spin one way in the northern hemisphere and the other way in the southern hemisphere? Weird, huh? Well, today we're going to find out. But first, there are some days in space that we are celebrating today. Today was the day that Venera 15 entered into orbit around Venus in 1983. Yesterday, in 2009, L-Cross detected water on the moon. So this was a good week for space exploration. I have a couple of technical notes also about this broadcast today. You might notice a little lagging, like I might freeze for a second, that I've got a couple of things going on. One, I'm broadcasting via Wi-Fi. I don't have a plugged-in connection, so that limits the frame rate. I'm also I have a problem with my built-in webcam, so I'm using an old iPhone as a webcam wirelessly on my Wi-Fi. So that is also competing for bandwidth. And I have a green screen effect going on top of all that, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but it's a lot to ask from my network. Although this software is doing a really good job, I have to say I'm impressed overall. Okay. So why do hurricanes spin? First of all, I have to turn off the green screen for this part, which I didn't even think about that until today. So, why do hurricanes spin? First off, we need to understand that the atmosphere is a fluid. That means that it behaves like a liquid. It flows, and it's all one thing surrounding the entire globe. So, imagine this being encased in a fluid. The sun heats up the equator more than it does the poles. And so the part of the atmosphere that's nearest the equator gets warmed up more relative to its nearby atmosphere. And, excuse me, and that causes the air to rise. The warmer air gets, the less dense it gets, because the air particles are moving around faster, so they knock each other further away from each other, and they occupy more space with fewer particles. All right, it's less dense. That causes it to rise up in the atmosphere, and cooler air will come in to take its place. Okay? That happens everywhere. But on the equator, because all of it is warm, we get a lot of movement here because the air goes up, air comes in to take its place. It's warm already, so it doesn't take long for it to go up. So there's a lot of motion happening in the atmosphere right there. So what tends to happen is the warmer air moves away from the equator, and it goes up and away from the equator, and the cooler air is pulled down to take its place. Okay, that's how it flows. Same in the southern hemisphere, it moves away from the equator. It goes up and away from the equator. But the Earth is also rotating. It's spinning. So when the and this spin, remember, the atmosphere is like a fluid that's covering the surface of the Earth. And so when the Earth spins, it's dragging the atmosphere along with it. So when the air is moving away from the equator in the northern hemisphere, the spin causes it to move to the east. So we get this kind of, sorry, I'm not doing that. We get this kind of motion because the Earth is moving, okay? So it causes this kind of swirl effect. When a hurricane forms, this effect gets kind of out of control. So you can see here these bands. What's happened is right here in the center, that part has such low pressure because the heated air is rising up and there's nothing that cool to take its place. And so it creates this suction area, the low pressure. And that's why a hurricane has an eye. Now it's low pressure. So that's trying to suck in something to take up that space because pressure differences are not allowed in nature unless there's a force keeping it that way. So, nature wants the pressure to be the same. So so it's pulling in, but remember the air coming up from the equator this way, it gets this little spin to it. So when let's say it starts over here, this air current, and it goes up here and it's spinning and gets sucked into that low pressure. Did you like that sound effect? That's what it really sounds like. Same thing from the air it's getting from the top. Remember, this cooler air is coming back to, normally it would be headed back towards the equator, but it is also being dragged by the rotation of the Earth. All right. So this is getting dragged and then it gets sucked into the low pressure of that hurricane. As long as the hurricane is able to maintain that pressure difference, then it can continue to build strength. So if you see a very well-defined eye wall, that is because the pressure difference is very great, very low pressure in the middle of that. And there's not a lot of cold air to go in and take its place. If there were, then that pressure difference would be nullified and a storm wouldn't form. But because of, again, the equator, you won't be able to see it, but just you can see, because of the equator getting more direct sunlight, we have this temperature difference. And if you might have noticed, you can't see that, sorry, that hurricanes typically form off of, I'm going to do everything backwards, this is so weird, off of the coast of Africa. All right, because the land is hot, the water's hot, there's really nowhere for cold air, right? So that's where these form. When they get out into the Pacific, it depends on how warm the ocean is. So if they get up here, if they turn up to the north, they're getting over colder waters, and that's why usually they end up kind of just fading out or going back out to sea. But if they dip south, backwards, if they dip south and they get into this warm Caribbean or the Gulf, there's a lot of heat there in that water to feed that storm. In the southern hemisphere, whoopsie. In the southern hemisphere, it's the same, but upside down. So the Earth is still rotating this way, but it's dragging everything this way instead of this way. So we get, I mean, it's the same direction, but because it's coming from the top, we get a opposite spin. Counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere, clockwise in the southern hemisphere. All right? That's why hurricanes spin. If you have any questions about hurricanes or spinning or green screens, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to let you know. Remember to tune in every weekday between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Central Time for Thoughts from a Dizzy Dude. If you want to support the show, that would be great. I put a link in the comments to my Patreon account. Also, if you want to try out this software that I'm using to do these broadcasts, I put a link in there as well. It's really great, and the developers are some of the most amazing people I've ever met, too. So, I hope you have a great day. Happy Wednesday, and I'll see you later. Bye.